Hi friends, as you can tell, it's the next day. The baby woke up and we got caught up doing things. So, this thing is so crooked. So I didn't end up finishing the recording. So, I want to say I left off where we had moved to New York in 2018 of August, and I got in contact with the clinic and my first appointment was December. So my first appointment really was just a consultation. It was just basically going over my medical history and bringing in whatever information or paperwork that I had. And I had my clinic from Georgia transferred things to them, so we went over that. And it was just a plan. It was formulating a plan on how we were going to move forward and what we were going to do. So we went ahead, I think I may have said this already, and did another dye test. And this one came back and my tube was blocked. The only tube I had, it was blocked. So it left us really, our hands were tied. It left us with no choice but to do IVF. So we looked into that, how we would get started, what it would mean as far as medication, finances, and just an overall overview of what the next year could possibly look like. And I was overwhelmed, to say the least. I just sat there, I looked at the lady and I just cried. I just bawled my eyes because I'm like, I'm getting sad thinking about it now, because I can remember I was like, well, I don't think we can afford it. I don't think we can afford it. Like, how that's thousands of dollars. Like, that's a lot of money. And so she gave me a whole lot of paperwork, and she kind of went over they have a payment plan. She said I could call the financial office, and so I just went home with a pamphlet, a booklet of pamphlets and information. And the drive home, because the clinic's like an hour and a half from where we live, and just the drive home, I'm just thinking, like, what is going on? Like what is happening right now? How is this even happening right now? I mean, I knew it was a little tricky getting pregnant in the first place, but I was so hopeful because I had that tube and I had that ovary, and I was just so hopeful. And I've heard and read so many stories of people who started taking fertility drugs and then somehow it did something to their bodies and they were able to conceive naturally. And I was just like, oh, I could be one of those people. And my hopes were like just up there because I had taken all those drugs prior, and I was like, oh, maybe my body just needs, like a little push. But it did not work out for me. It didn't work out that way. So the next couple months really was just, again, tracking my ovulation and to see if I was even ovulating, and ultrasounds and blood work and just constant testings, honestly, just to see how we could go about it. I mean, the bottom line was we were doing IVF. That was it. But with that, your body has to be not perfect, but your body has to be at certain points where certain things can happen. So you have to prepare your body. If you're on birth control, you have to stop birth control. Or they put you on birth control just to have some sense of control over your body. So from that point on, everything really is just like strategic, and everything has to go according to plan. So it's like, okay, you're gonna get your period now, and then so many days before your period, this is when you have to come, and then we're gonna do this test, and then so many days after your period, you gotta come back, you gotta do this test, and so it's like, honestly, this became my life. Like, it became my life. I graduated college May of 2019, and this was the first time we've moved somewhere, and I never found a full-time job. I made the decision that getting pregnant was going to be my job. I know, silly, I know, but I just felt like it was almost now or never, because in the past I was always busy. I was working full time. I was going to school full time. We had moved and organizing the house, and like there was just always an excuse, really. When I think about it now, they were just all excuses, because I didn't want to admit to myself that I had a problem. I didn't want to admit that this was not going to be as easy as I thought it was going to be. I figured if I just filled my mind and my time with things, it would happen. Naive, I know, but that was my thinking at the time. But then now I'm like, oh goodness, like I'm 30 up there and it's going, and your mind gets so clouded with the older you get, the less eggs you have, and and it's going to be more difficult for this and difficult for that. And I already had all these reproductive problems, and then my age was on there too, and my weight. Every time I went to the doctors, it's like, oh, you do realize that you are obese, and maybe if you lost a little bit of weight, you could get pregnant, and maybe if this with your weight, and eat this, and don't eat that, and change this, and exercise. It was a lot. Like, it was a lot. And so being busy kind of would take my mind off of that until it was time to go to the doctors again. But when I graduated, I told Blake I was determined. I'm like, I'm getting pregnant this year, next year. I'm getting pregnant, and I made that my job. And things are falling. And with that said, I opted to substitute, so I would be more flexible. So substituting allowed me, to work when they needed me, but then also not to work when I needed not to work, and go here and go there and do all of those things, because I didn't want to make a commitment and then constantly asking for time off, because I have to drive an hour and a half for an appointment that's probably going to take me 5 minutes, or oh, I can't come into work today because my cramps are so bad, or I have to go to the emergency room. Like, I just didn't want to deal with all of that, so I just opted not to work full time, but as a substitute, which was amazing, honestly, because the job I ended up getting, they were so understanding. They were just so flexible. They were just so accommodating. Like, it made going to these appointments easier, because I didn't feel guilty that I had to skip out on work, or I didn't feel guilty that, so that's what it was. So after graduating, we were like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. So we went ahead and we we opened up a special savings account. It was called the IVF fund, and that was the fund where any extra money, or any kind of extra funds we had would go. We both had access to the account, but we just didn't use it. Like, it was not for withdrawals, but just mainly deposits. And I mean, it worked out, because as time went by, my friends would ask me what I wanted for my birthday and stuff, and I was like, oh, you can just give me money. Honestly, $20, $50, like, it really doesn't matter. Just give me money, or just deposit into my fund. You can Zelle it into my fund. And as silly as it sounds, every bit counted, every bit mattered, every bit made a difference. Even a mere $10 made a difference. So as time went by, that's how we started with the money. And so while I was exploring and figuring out what was going on with my body and stuff like that, we started with getting money together. And I mean, it worked out until Corona. And honestly, coronavirus just put a damper on everything, because it got to a point where if you were so far along in your treatments, they would see you or wouldn't see you. And because I hadn't even started with any stims, it was just like, well, we're just gonna have to wait and see how things go. And I mean, It was okay, but it wasn't. It was okay because it gave my body a rest. It gave me a chance to rest and stop being poked and prodded and tested. But it wasn't okay because I felt like, oh my gosh, one more thing to push me back, one more thing to delay, one more thing that's not going to work out. But unfortunately, we had no control over it. It's just one of those things that we had to go with. We had no control over it. So that's where 2019 was. It was just there. We didn't do anything because of that. And then 2020, we were like, okay, same thing. Back and forth, back and forth. We don't know what is happening, where we're going. But I was getting frustrated, honestly. I was getting frustrated because it just wasn't working out. And I was hopeful at times, like if I got test back and it was like, oh, this looks good, keep doing it until the next appointment. That looks good, keep doing it until the next appointment. And then it's like, oh, stop all medications. This test came back and it's not working out. So that's where it was. And then, so there was 19, end of 19, 20, end of 20. I thought I was going to start in August. I thought, okay, now it's going. We're going to start this in August, looking into getting our medications and things like that. August came and went. It didn't work out. My levels just weren't where they needed to be. So we just kept pushing it and kept pushing it. And then we were like, okay, in the meantime, I can get the medications. Now, mind you, the clinic provides you with resources for treatments like medications and things like that. But ultimately, it's up to your insurance company, like whatever your policy is and how they're going to do it. Now, with my insurance, they don't cover IVF, which is a whole nother debate. And it really breaks my heart, but it's a whole another debate. But they don't cover it. However, the procedure part, the part with the clinic where they actually do the transfer, like the insurance, you do get a discount. We get like a 5%. I think it was 5% military discount is what we got. Which 5% is like, oh, that's not even a lot. However, I mean, a couple hundreds off makes a big difference because you can take that money and use it somewhere else. So when it came to the medications, we were exploring all kinds of revenues, all the pharmacies that they gave us. I mean, even with clinics too. I mean, before we even settled with this clinic, like, okay, this is where we're gonna do it. I feel comfortable here. I trust these people here. We looked all over. I mean, we live in New York, but we looked in Washington. We looked in Ohio. We looked in Texas. But then it all boiled down to me having to go stay there for a little bit. Because once you start this process, you're getting monitored. So you went to the clinic every 3 days. So I'd have to stay there. And then another problem comes up is like, where do I stay? Do I have to be in a hotel? How long do I have to be in that hotel? We need to rent a car. How long? So that was like extra money that we couldn't afford to be using. We couldn't afford to be spending because that money could, be dumped into the whole IVF fund. So we just ended up staying where we were. And honestly, in comparison, they are relatively cheaper. I mean, it's still expensive, don't get me wrong. But it's still relatively cheaper in comparison to other states. So, long story, we just stayed there. So we ended up going with this pharmacy called Integrity. They are in Arizona, and they're a specialty clinic, so they specialize in IVF medicines. And so I gave the lady a call. Oh my gosh, the sweetest people ever. They sent me out a quote. I emailed her all the medications, the list of medications from the doctor that I would need. She emailed me back with a quote of how much everything's gonna be, and she said they could throw in a few things here and there, which was so heaven sent. So we ended up going with them, and I received my medication 2020. So when I got the medication, that was it. That I was legit. I'm like, I'm having a baby. Like it was legit. This thing came in a big old box with dry ice and everything. Like it was happening. It was happening. I was sad because I paid like $4,000 and some change, but I was happy because that meant I was so much closer. Like that was the first time I got like an abundance of treatments, and that was like, okay, this solidifies everything. Like this is like, it's happening. So yeah, so I'm gonna stop here only because with yesterday's video and this one, it's just lengthy and I'm just like yapping. So I'll stop here, and then the next video I will talk about the medications and I will show you some of them. So I do hope that this was helpful. I mean, I know it's like nothing specific, it's just me, my story, what happened up until we started. But I mean, I think moving forward, I could definitely focus and zoom in on specific things, and then we can just highlight specific things. But this was just a little something to how I couldn't get pregnant, but then I did. Yeah, but then I did. Yeah, so I'll stop here, and then